The clock of deep time. Close your eyes for a moment. Try to picture the entire history of the blue planet we call home, from a lifeless ball of molten lava drifting in the darkness of space to the brilliant world of glittering city lights we know today. All of that majesty, all of that brutality and wonder is now compressed into a single cycle of day and night. 24 hours. Suppose the Earth was born at the stroke of midnight 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Can you guess at what time the Tyrannosaurus Rex, that icon of raw power, first let out its roar in the morning mist, at high noon, or in the late hours of the evening? And the most haunting question of all, at what moment in those 24 hours did the species that calls itself the master of all things humanity finally step onto the stage? The truth may send a shiver down your spine. Every empire you ever read about, every pharaoh who raised a pyramid, every world war that stained the oceans red, every rocket ever launched toward the stars, all of it unfolded in less than the final tenth of a second of the day. A single blink of an eye. 4.5 billion years is a number so vast our small minds cannot truly hold it. 80 years of a human life placed beside the age of the Earth is not even a single grain of sand in the whole Sahara. To make it real, shrink the whole 4.5 billion years down to a single calendar year beginning on the 1st of January. On that scale, life appears in late February, but the dinosaurs do not arrive until the middle of December, and they vanish the day after Christmas. And every human being who has ever lived, every pharaoh, every emperor, every person you have ever known, fits into the final 11 minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve. Recorded history is the last 30 seconds. Your entire life so far is a single blink before the clock resets. So to grasp it, we set one ruthless rule. We compress all 4.5 billion years into a 24-hour clock. On this clock, every hour equals about 187 million real years. Every minute, 3 million years, and with every tick of the second hand, 52,000 years flash past, sweeping away lives, drowning continents, leveling mountains. On this clock, all things are fleeting. A raging ocean can boil into a desert in seconds. Giants that seemed invincible can vanish after a single sigh. Take a deep breath and cast aside every notion of time you have ever known. The greatest journey back to the dawn of everything begins now. Before we begin, let us be honest about the scale we are dealing with. If you tried to live through this day in real time, watching one real year pass every 100th of a millisecond, you would never reach the end. You would sit for a human lifetime and barely move the second hand. That is how thin our slice of existence truly is. And so, as the first second of this cosmic day begins to tick, remember that everything you are about to witness is real. Every fire, every flood, every extinction truly happened on the very ground beneath your feet. This is not a fable, this is the biography of your home. One more rule before the clock begins. Time on this journey is not steady, it only feels that way. For the first several hours, almost nothing happens that you could see with your eyes. No animals, no plants, no color, but the slow shift of a poisoned sky. The drama of complex life, the part we cannot look away from, is crammed into the final few hours of the day. So be patient through the long, dark morning. What waits at dusk is worth every silent second. There is one number worth holding on to as we go. 99.9% of every species that has ever lived on this planet is already extinct. Life is not a gentle, steady climb toward us. It is a story of wild experiments, staggering successes, and near-total annihilations over and over again. We are not the goal of this story. We are simply the ones lucky enough for now to be here telling it. So let me ask you to do something as we begin. Whatever room you are in, whatever ordinary day surrounds you, set it aside for the next hour. The chair you sit in, the light in the sky, the very air in your lungs, all of it was built by the events we are about to witness. By the time this clock finishes its single turn, you will never look at a sunrise, a mountain, or your own hands in quite the same way again. That is a promise. Now take a breath. The clock is about to start. Hell on Earth and the birth of the moon. The clock strikes 0, the beginning of everything. If you could stand in space and look down at where Earth should be, you would see no blue oceans, no green continents. Instead, a nightmare sphere greets you, a massive furnace of fire hanging in the cold dark of the young solar system. Scientists call this the Hadean Eon, named after Hades, ruler of the underworld, and no name could be more fitting. 4.5 billion years ago, there was no solid ground to stand on. The whole surface was an ocean of boiling magma, churning at over 2,000 degrees. Now imagine you, a 21st century human, were dropped onto this world. There would be no ground beneath your feet, only churning fire. The sky would hold no blue, only a suffocating curtain of dust, toxic sulfur and steam rising from lava pits. The air itself would dissolve you in an instant. This was a planet of pure death. There would be no horizon as you know it, only a glowing, restless sea of orange stretching in every direction, cracked by rivers of brighter fire where fresh magma welled up from below. Fountains of molten rock would leap hundreds of meters into a sky the color of dried blood. And there would be no sound of life at all, only the low, endless roar of a world still being forged. And yet, even in this hell, the raw materials of everything to come were already present. The carbon that would one day become forests and dinosaurs and human hearts was here, locked in rock and gas. The water that would fill every ocean was arriving comet by comet from the frozen edges of the solar system. Nothing was alive, but everything that would ever live was already here, waiting for the temperature to drop. When Thea struck, if any eye could have watched from a safe distance in space, it would have seen the unthinkable. 2 worlds merging in a flash of white light, a spray of molten droplets arcing out like a fountain of fire, and then a glowing double planet wrapped in a disk of vapor. For 1,000 years, Earth was not a sphere at all, but a spinning, half-liquid blob, radiating so much heat it glowed like a dim red star. It is almost impossible to believe that from this chaos would one day come still ponds, quiet forests, and a child's laughter. But it would. There is a deep strangeness in knowing that the ground you stand on, the rock beneath every city and every sea, is partly the shattered corpse of another world. Thea is not entirely gone. Its iron sank into our core. Its dust became our moon. Its substance is woven into the very stone of the earth. In a sense, you live on the grave of 2 planets fused into one. Every mountain is a monument to a collision no eye ever saw. And the moon that rose from that wreckage did more than steady our spin. In those early days, it hung so close that it raised colossal tides, sweeping vast volumes of mineral-rich water across the young continents twice a day. Some scientists suspect those relentless tides mixing chemistry between sea and stone may have helped set the stage for life itself. If so, then even the way life began owes a quiet debt to the world we destroyed. Days here were not 24 hours. The young Earth spun so fast that a single day lasted perhaps 5 or 6 hours. The moon, newly born and terrifyingly close, filled a huge portion of the sky, its own surface still glowing with lava, raising tides in the magma ocean that we can scarcely imagine. But the violence of the universe was not finished. Only 10 minutes have passed on our clock. From the darkness, another world comes hurtling in, a protoplanet the size of Mars, more than 6,000 kilometers across. Astronomers call it Thea. Gravity locked the 2 spheres into an unavoidable dance of death. And then the collision. A blow beyond all imagining. The energy released was billions of times greater than the most powerful bomb ever built. The outer layers of both worlds vaporized into plasma. Thea was shattered. Earth itself nearly broke apart. Our planet's axis was knocked askew, and Thea's heavy iron core sank down and merged with Earth's own, strengthening the magnetic field that would one day shield us from the sun's deadly radiation. From the debris flung into orbit, trillions of tons of molten rock and dust, a fiery ring formed around Earth, no different from the rings of Saturn today. Over thousands of years, a mere blink on our clock, those fragments melted and fused together. From the ashes of the greatest destruction, a faithful companion was born. The Moon. In those early days, the Moon hung far closer, a giant orb of glowing rock filling the sky. And this companion became Earth's savior. Its gravity acts as an anchor holding our axial tilt steady at 23.5 degrees. Without Theia, without the Moon, Earth would wobble wildly, its poles flipping its climate, lurching into chaos, and complex life might never have had a chance. The destroyer, named Theia, was in truth the greatest gift the universe ever gave us. Think about that for a moment. The very thing that nearly destroyed the infant Earth is the reason you have seasons, stable weather, and nights lit by a familiar silver light. Every tide that has ever rolled up a beach, every poem written under a full moon, traces back to that single act of cosmic violence 4.5 billion years ago. The Great Rain and the First Oceans, the clock counts on indifferent. 1, 2, 3 in the morning, after the terrible shock, Earth began to cool. The cold of space drew away the heat. The churning magma hardened into a thin, cracked crust of black basalt. Yet giant volcanoes still tore the sky with pillars of ash, pumping gas and water vapor into a thickening atmosphere. Water vapor, that is the key word now. Carried by millions of comets and asteroids and released from the rocks within the planet itself. Across the murky sky, heavy clouds gathered until the air was saturated to its limit. And as the clock neared 4, Earth's temperature at last dropped below the boiling point of water. The first drop of rain in history fell onto scorching rock and vanished in an instant. But behind it came another, then thousands, then countless billions. The greatest rain in history had begun. And it did not last days or weeks. It fell for millions of years without stopping. Water cascaded from the gray sky, drenching barren volcanic plains, carving rivers of mud and mineral, filling the giant craters left by ancient impacts. And by 4 in the morning, 4 billion years ago, the million-year rain finally ceased. The sky cleared, the world had utterly changed. The hellfire was gone, and in its place lay something just as magnificent, the primordial oceans. Picture the sheer volume of it. Enough water to fill every ocean on Earth today, falling out of the sky over and over as it evaporated off the hot rock and rained back down. Lightning split the perpetual gloom, and thunder rolled across a world with no ears to hear it. For 100 human lifetimes, stacked end to end, and then 100,000 more, it simply rained. Now imagine you, a modern human, in a raincoat, dropped onto that young world beneath the endless storm. You could not see the sun, only a bruised gray glow behind the clouds. Warm rain would hammer down on black volcanic rock, running off in muddy torrents the color of rust. There would be no birdsong, no insects, no green, only water, stone, and the roar of a downpour that had already lasted longer than the entire history of your species and would go on longer still. This is the sound of a planet filling its oceans. But do not let the word fool you. This was no tropical paradise. It was a vast expanse of deep green and murky brown, stained by dissolved iron and mineral. The seawater was fiercely acidic. The sky above burned a brilliant orange-red from the sheer weight of carbon dioxide. Everything lay in gloomy silence, broken only by waves lapping against desolate cliffs of stone. If you stood on one of those black shores, you would taste metal and sulfur in the wind. The sea would not be safe to touch, and yet this poisonous alien ocean was the most precious thing in the universe because it was warm, it was wet, and it was rich with the raw ingredients of life. It was a chemistry set the size of a planet, and it had 400 million years to run its experiment. For all those ages, the planet turned in silence, its oceans churning under a strange sky. No eye watched the sunsets, no creature felt the warmth of the shallows. And yet, in the patient dark, atoms were finding each other, breaking apart and finding each other again, trying combination after combination in numbers beyond counting. Somewhere in that endless shuffle, the universe was quietly dealing itself the one hand that would change everything. 400 million years. Say it slowly. That is longer than the entire age of dinosaurs, longer than the time since the first fish crawled onto land, all spent simply stirring chemistry in a warm, dark sea before a single living thing appeared. Deep time is the true main character of this story. It is the patient sculptor with all the time in the world, and it never ever stops working. Here is a way to feel it. If every real year were a single sheet of paper, and you stacked them up, the paper covering just the Hadean and its aftermath would form a tower reaching far beyond the moon. And in all that towering stack, there is not one page with a footprint on it, not one with a leaf, not one with a bone. The whole vast library of early Earth is written in nothing but stone, fire, and water. Earth had been baptized by fire and by water. The stage was set. The harsh conditions life would need had at last converged. And in the silence of that giant ocean, a miracle was quietly preparing to begin. The spark of life in the abyss. The clock strikes 4. The sky is still a thick, toxic orange red, and acid rain still falls now and then upon the desolate sea. If you glided over those black waves, Earth would seem a dead planet, not a branch, not a blade of grass, no bird, no beast. Absolute silence covered the world. But the universe hides its greatest secrets in the darkest places. So let us dive down together, thousands of meters to the floor of the primordial ocean where sunlight can never reach. Now imagine you, a modern human, in a deep-sea submersible descending into that primordial ocean. Your lights carve a small cone in absolute blackness. The pressure outside would crush a car flat, and then out of the dark they appear, towering chimneys of black rock, belching superheated water that shimmers like smoke, glowing faintly with mineral heat. It looks like the throat of the underworld. And yet this is not a place of death. This, of all the unlikely places in the universe, is very likely the cradle where life first stirred. In that cold abyss, under crushing pressure, the crust cracked open. Frigid seawater seeped down, met the fiery magma below, was superheated and blasted back up. These were the black smokers, hydrothermal vents pouring a thick soup of minerals, iron, and primordial chemicals into the sea. Right at that fragile border between bone-chilling cold and furious heat, one of the universe's strangest miracles took place. For tens of millions of years, countless chemical reactions collided again and again. Atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, through some miraculous roll of the dice, bonded into the first organic molecules. Then, those molecules curled up, wrapping themselves in a thin lipid membrane to separate from the chaos outside. And then, a spark. A structure with no eyes, no brain, no limbs, but holding a power no rock or mountain ever had the ability to copy itself. The first single-celled organism of Earth was born. It is worth pausing on how strange this really is. Not once in a laboratory have we ever managed to repeat it, to take dead chemistry and coax it into something that wants to live, that copies itself, that carries information forward through time. Yet somewhere in that dark, crushing water, chance and chemistry and deep time conspired, and the line was crossed. Non-life became life. That first cell had no ambition, no awareness. It did not know it was the ancestor of forests and whales and symphonies. It only knew how to persist and to make copies of itself that persisted too. But that was enough. Once life learned to copy, it could never be fully erased again. The universe had lit a candle that 4 billion years of catastrophe would fail to blow out. For a long time, these first cells lived by chemistry alone, feeding on the minerals bleeding from the vents, never once needing the sun. In the deepest sense, the earliest life on Earth was a creature of the underworld, born in darkness, fed by the planet's own inner fire. It would be hundreds of millions of years before any living thing dared to climb toward the light and learn to drink from the sun. And notice something quietly astonishing: from that single origin, life never had to be invented twice. Every creature that has ever existed, from that first cell to the blue whale to you, is one unbroken chain of copying, stretching back without a single gap for nearly 4 billion years. If any one of your ancestors at any point along that impossibly long line had failed to reproduce, you would not be here. You are the living tip of the oldest, most stubborn success story in the universe. We still do not know if this happened easily or only once in a billion worlds. It is possible that the spark of life is common across the cosmos and that countless dark oceans on distant planets have lit their own candles. It is also possible that it is vanishingly rare that we are against staggering odds alone. Either answer is overwhelming, but whichever is true, it happened here on this ordinary rock in a deep and lightless sea. And because it did, the universe now has a way of knowing itself. Every living thing today, the blue whale, the ancient oak, and you yourself listening now, shares one common ancestor, born from that murky vent at the bottom of the sea. We call it the last universal common ancestor. From that single spark, all of life would one day flow. The oxygen catastrophe and Snowball Earth. The clock ticks coldly on. 5, 7, 10 in the morning. If you expect a great sea monster to rise from the water, you will be disappointed. For 6 long hours on our clock, a billion real years, life stood almost still. Its only heroes were single-celled bacteria, too small for the eye to see, clinging to dark rock, eating chemicals to survive. Then the clock strikes 1 in the afternoon. The sun beats down hardest on the sea, and here a branch of bacteria launched the boldest revolution in the history of life. Instead of scavenging chemicals in the deep, they rose to the surface. We call them cyanobacteria, and they invented an unheard-of machine photosynthesis. Using green chlorophyll, they drank sunlight directly, splitting water and carbon dioxide to make their own food. This power to create energy from almost nothing turned them into rulers. They multiplied at dizzying speed, carpeting the seas with vast microbial mats. But there was one deadly detail. Like any factory, photosynthesis made waste, and that waste was the very thing we breathe today: oxygen. If you could have sailed that ancient sea, you would have seen it turn from clear to green to a thick, scummy soup stretching from horizon to horizon. These slimy mats were the most important living things that had ever existed. Slowly, invisibly, breath by microscopic breath, they were terraforming an entire planet, filling the air with a gas that would one day let creatures run and fly and think. They were building the sky we breathe. Take a slow breath right now and hold it for a moment. Roughly 1 in every 5 molecules you just drew in is oxygen, and every last atom of it was first breathed out by microscopic bacteria in oceans that vanished billions of years before the first fish, the first tree, the first thought. You are quite literally breathing the exhaust of the oldest life on Earth. The most ordinary act of your body is a direct inheritance from a slimy green mat that ruled the seas an unimaginable span of time ago. Remember, to the life of that era, oxygen was worthless. No, worse, it was poison, a savage reactive gas that tore through cell walls and destroyed DNA on contact. As the cyanobacteria bloomed, they pumped billions of tons of it into the sea, and a planet-wide massacre began. Wherever oxygen spread, the old life was destroyed. The dissolved iron in the oceans rusted, and billions of tons of deep red iron oxide sank to the seabed, staining the water like a giant pot of rusty soup. Only after all that iron was spent did the excess oxygen finally bubble up into the sky. The world changed forever. The toxic orange sky slowly turned pale blue. Geologists call it the Great Oxygenation Event. For the first time, it was not an asteroid or a volcano, but life itself that caused a mass extinction. Stop and picture that change from space over countless ages, a sickly orange world, slowly, gently bluing like a bruise, healing in reverse. It is the single most important makeover in the planet's history. That blue is not just a color. It is the visible signature of a world that has been utterly transformed by life. The first time in the universe, as far as we know, that living things reached up and painted their own sky. There is a dark irony here that echoes into our own age. The cyanobacteria did not mean to poison their world. They simply did what worked, multiplied as fast as they could, and dumped their waste into the commons around them, until the waste itself remade the entire planet. If that sounds familiar, it should. Life has changed the atmosphere before, blindly and completely, and the ones who caused it did not survive the world they made. And the catastrophe did not stop there. Oxygen destroyed the methane that had kept Earth warm, like smashing every window of a greenhouse in the dead of winter. Temperatures plunged. The clock strikes 2. The sun still shines but gives no heat. Global temperatures fell to -50. White ice sheets crawled from the poles toward the equator, reflecting sunlight away, making the planet colder still, an unstoppable loop of doom. Soon, every ocean froze solid beneath ice kilometers thick. Even the equator drowned in endless blizzards. From space, Earth was no longer a fireball nor a blue marble. It had become Snowball Earth, a brilliant white, silent, deadly prison drifting through space. And yet, deep beneath the cracked ice around rare volcanic vents, tiny seeds of life still huddled together, waiting for rescue. Imagine standing on that frozen surface. In every direction, a blinding white plain stretches to the horizon, hard as iron, cold enough to crack steel. There is no open water, no green, no movement. The sun hangs pale and useless in a dark sky. It is the quietest the Earth has ever been or ever will be again. And beneath your feet, kilometers down, the last survivors of an entire planet cling to a few warm cracks in the dark, holding the whole future of life in their fragile chemistry. Twice, perhaps more, the entire Earth may have frozen this way and thawed again. Each time life was pushed to the very edge and clawed its way back. There is a strange lesson buried in that ice catastrophe and renewal are not opposites here. Again and again on this planet, the same events that nearly ended life also cleared the way for something new. Destruction on the scale of deep time is just another word for change. And consider what came after the ice finally broke. When the great thaw arrived, the seas were suddenly flooded with nutrients, scoured from the frozen land, and sunlight poured into warming water. Life so long imprisoned roared back with a vigor it had never shown before. Some scientists believe it was precisely this brutal cycle of freezing and thawing that lit the fuse for complex life itself. The worst winter the planet ever knew may have been the very thing that made animals possible, for the magma heart of Earth never stopped beating. Supervolcanoes tore through the ice at last, and though they spilled red lava onto the white, their greater gift was carbon dioxide, billions of tons of it, with no ocean left to absorb it. The gas built into a thick blanket, trapping the sun's heat. Temperatures crept upward, the eternal ice cracked and melted, liquid water returned, and the snowball was saved. Alien and the first complex life. The clock passes 2, 3, 5, 7 in the evening. The virtual sun sinks toward the horizon, and we enter an age geologists jokingly call the boring billion. For nearly 7 hours on our scale, over 1 billion real years, Earth's surface seemed frozen in perfect balance. The climate stayed strangely stable, the oceans calm and gray. No asteroids, no ice ages, no great beasts broke the silence. But do not let the calm fool you. Beneath those gentle waves, the greatest revolution in biology was happening on a scale too small to see. In the vast ocean, a large predatory cell swallowed a smaller one. Normally, the prey would be digested. But a miraculous error occurred. The small one did not die. It went on living inside its captor. The swallowed cell held a power its captor craved, the ability to turn oxygen into vast energy. The two struck an eternal peace. The large one gave shelter and food. The small one became a tireless power plant. In time, that tiny cell became the mitochondria found in every complex cell today. We call this the endosymbiotic theory, and it gave birth to the eukaryotes. Every animal, plant, and fungus, and we ourselves, are descendants of that one lucky act of swallowing. Without it, Earth would forever be a puddle of simple bacteria. Stop and consider what a fluke this was. Predation between single cells must have happened countless times, always ending the same way. One cell digested, gone. But once, just once, the meal refused to die, and the two became one. Every complex cell in your body still carries the descendants of that swallowed guest, quietly burning oxygen to power your every thought. You are quite literally a partnership 2 billion years in the making. And this new kind of cell, the eukaryote, was something genuinely new under the sun. It was larger, more complex, with its precious DNA locked safely inside a nucleus and a power plant humming in its heart. It could grow, specialize, and one day join with others to build bodies. Every plant you have ever seen, every animal, every mushroom is built from this one design. The boring billion was not empty after all. In its long silence, the cell that would build the visible world was quietly assembled. There is a lesson in that long, dull stretch of time. We tend to think of progress as constant and fast, but the deepest changes here took 1 billion patient years hidden from view, with nothing dramatic to show on the surface. Sometimes the most important work is invisible and unbearably slow. The boring billion was not the planet resting, it was the planet thinking. The clock strikes 8:30. Night is falling. Only 3.5 hours remain, and at last, Earth's patience is rewarded. In warm, shallow seas, single cells began to cluster to divide labor to form the first multicellular life. The Ediacaran period begins. Now imagine you could dive into the Ediacaran garden. You would think you had landed on another planet. No fish, no coral, no algae, only the strangest shapes ever to exist. Some like giant fern leaves rooted in the mud, swaying with the current. Some like oval air mattresses resting on the sand, soft, boneless, without heads or eyes or even mouths. They simply absorbed nutrients through their fragile skin. These were the first large living things you could have seen without a microscope, the first time in over 3 billion years that life became visible to the naked eye. After an eternity of an empty-looking world, the seafloor was suddenly a slow, silent garden of living shapes. If you had walked the shoreline then, you still would have found the land utterly bare, but just offshore in the shallows, life had finally grown big enough to notice. The Garden of Ediacara was a world of absolute peace, an age without crime, without predators, without fear, no claws, no teeth, no blood. Everything drifted and existed in a gentle dance beneath the dim, filtered moonlight. But this peace would not last. Life was about to discover its cruelest weapon and its greatest engine of change, predation. It is almost impossible, standing in that peaceful garden, to believe what is coming. Within a sliver of time, this soft and silent world will erupt into the most explosive burst of creativity and violence in the entire history of the planet. The gentle drifting shapes will give way to armored hunters and darting prey to claws and eyes and racing nerves. The long, patient morning of life is over. The afternoon, loud and bloody and brilliant, is about to begin. There is something almost unbearably peaceful about the Ediacaran knowing what comes next. This was Eden before the fall, a whole world of creatures that never fought, never fled, never felt fear because there was nothing yet to fear. They had the seas entirely to themselves for tens of millions of years, and not one of them could have sensed the shadow gathering at the edge of their gentle garden. Look closely at these soft creatures because you will never see their like again. When the next chapter comes, almost every one of them will vanish, leaving only faint impressions in ancient stone. They are the forgotten first draft of complex life, an entire experiment in how to be an animal that evolution tried and then set aside. For a few tens of millions of years, though, the whole living world was gentle. It is worth remembering that it was once possible. The Cambrian explosion and the first king. Darkness deepens on our clock face. But beneath the silent Ediacaran seas, the most terrifying yet greatest invention in the history of life was taking shape. The mouth, and with it, a complete digestive system. For billions of years, life had been innocent and passive, lying on the mud, absorbing scraps of energy through its skin. That perfect balance shattered forever when one anonymous mutant realized a cruel truth. Why gather crumbs of energy from the water when you can seize a whole living block of it by tearing another creature apart? Predation was born, and the ocean turned from a quiet paradise into a bloody arena. The clock strikes 4 minutes past 9. Only minutes on our scale, but a moment paleontologists bow to in awe. The Big Bang of life, the Cambrian explosion. Like a reactor spinning out of control, biodiversity erupted at insane speed. To survive a world suddenly full of hungry enemies, gentle creatures had to evolve or die. They pulled calcium from the seawater to forge armored shells. They grew rows of spikes to pierce their enemies. They built jointed legs to crawl faster and fins to swim. But the greatest invention of the Cambrian was not fang or claw. It was the eye. Before the Cambrian, the world was blind. Now light-sensitive cells converged into eyes, and for the first time sunlight brought not just heat, but information, the power to see an enemy from afar, to lock onto prey. The one who saw first survived. The blind were eliminated. And from that visual revolution stepped the ocean's first brutal king. Speak its name with awe, Anomalocaris. Think of what that title means. For the first time in the 4 billion-year history of the planet, there was a creature that actively hunted, that chose its prey, that ruled others through fear. Every predator that would ever follow, every shark, every wolf, every tyrant lizard, is heir to that idea born in the Cambrian dark. The role of the apex predator, the terror at the top, had been created, and it has never once stood empty since. Picture the Cambrian seafloor at the height of that first arms race. Trilobites in 1,000 shapes trundle across the sand, some rolling into armored balls at the first hint of danger. Strange, five-eyed creatures drift past on unknown errands. Spiny worms as long as your arm burrow and hunt in the mud. It is a world both utterly foreign and strangely familiar, for it is here, in this chaos, that the basic body plans of nearly all future animals were being tried out for the very first time. Look closely and you are watching the blueprint of the animal kingdom being drawn. If you were a tiny trilobite digging in the mud, Anomalocaris was the reaper. Picture a monster up to 1 meter long, absurdly giant beside creatures only millimeters in size. It glided silently on 2 rows of rippling fins like a living stealth submarine. On its head, huge compound eyes of thousands of lenses swept the seabed with a cold gaze. When it locked on, it struck 2 spiked tentacles, seizing the prey, cramming it into a round mouth ringed with dozens of razor teeth. The animal kingdom had its first emperor, and his crown was forged from cruelty. The Cambrian did not just add new animals, it invented the very idea of the body as we know it. Almost every major group of animals alive today, from insects to starfish to the distant ancestors of vertebrates, first appears in this narrow window. It is as if evolution handed the new tools of eyes and jaws and armor, suddenly tried every possible design at once in a frenzy of creation and slaughter that has never been equaled since. And if you could dip below the surface of a Cambrian sea, you would finally recognize it as alive. Things dart away from your shadow, armored creatures scuttle across the sand, eyes, real eyes, turn to track you. For the first time in the planet's long story, the ocean has become a place where being seen can mean being eaten. Fear itself has been invented. With fear came speed and armor and cunning and every trick of survival that fills the natural world today. The arms race that began in the Cambrian has never once paused in 500 million years. Every set of jaws sharpened the reflexes of its prey. Every faster prey drove its hunters to grow faster still. The gentle garden was gone for good, replaced by something far more dangerous, far more inventive, and far more alive. It is strange to feel grateful for the invention of killing. And yet, here we are. Without predators, there was no pressure to grow eyes or fins or brains or shells. A world without hunger stayed soft and simple for billions of years. It was the arrival of the hunter that forced life to become fast, clever, and complex, that carved the first nervous systems and sharpened the first senses. In a very real way, everything interesting about animals ourselves included was forged in the fear of being eaten. The conquest of land and the age of giant insects, but life could not stay imprisoned beneath the salt water forever. The clock moves to 9:52. High above, the atmosphere had quietly changed. Thanks to billions of years of cyanobacteria and algae, oxygen had reached a critical level. Struck by ultraviolet light, oxygen, high in the sky, recombined into ozone, and Earth's greatest invisible shield was complete. It wrapped the planet and turned back the sun's deadly radiation, transforming the barren land, scorched for 4 billion years, into a promised land. The invasion began with silent armies. Moss, ancient fungi, and primitive ferns crept ashore. Their roots secreted acid, broke down rock, and created that miracle we call soil. For the first time, Earth wore a green cloak of life. It is hard to overstate how alien a land plant would have looked to the ocean world that made it. Life had spent nearly 4 billion years underwater, weightless, and bathed in nutrients. To leave the sea meant fighting gravity, resisting the drying wind, and inventing entirely new plumbing to carry water upward against the pull of the earth. And yet plants did it, and in doing so they slowly built the soil, the forests, and the very air that everything after them would need. And where there is food, hunters follow. The bravest creatures left the ocean behind. Arthropods led the way, the ancestors of scorpions, spiders, and centipedes, carrying armored shells to hold in moisture and new lungs to breathe the air. Soon after, our own ancestors, lobe-finned fish, dragged themselves through the mud on muscular fins, gulping their first breaths. Life had conquered the whole planet. Stand on a shore at the moment of that great crossing, and you would witness one of the bravest acts in all of history. A fish gasping, dragging its heavy body across the mud on stubby fins, driven by some blind urge toward a land no vertebrate had ever touched. Each such creature that survived a little longer out of water passed on its slightly stronger limbs, its slightly better lungs. Multiply that struggle across millions of years, and those desperate fins become legs. Those gulping mouths become lungs. The road to every creature that has ever walked, run, or flown began in that mud. Look down at your own wrist and flex it. That joint and the single bone above it branching into two below is a direct inheritance from those lobe-finned fish that hauled themselves ashore. The same basic pattern of bones is in the wing of a bat, the flipper of a whale, the leg of a horse, and the arm you are resting on right now. We did not design these limbs. We inherited them almost unchanged from a desperate fish in a drying pool 370 million years ago. You carry that ancient fish inside your own hand. 10:30. Welcome to the Carboniferous, the age of giant nightmares. Earth now looked like the set of a horror film. Dense, humid, dark swamp forests covering the continents, ferns and scale trees soaring 30 meters into a canopy that blotted out the sun. But the strangest thing was in the air itself. In the Carboniferous, nature had not yet evolved bacteria that could rot wood. So when the giant trees fell, they did not decay. They piled up and were buried, locking their carbon underground forever. This runaway photosynthesis pushed atmospheric oxygen to a staggering 35%, a powerful drug for the animal kingdom and above all for insects who breathe through tiny holes along their bodies. The more oxygen, the larger they could grow. And grow they did. Now imagine you, a modern human, walking beneath that stifling canopy. If you hear a deafening beat of wings duck, a terror of the carboniferous sky has just glided over your head. Meganeura, a predatory dragonfly the size of a hawk with a wingspan of nearly a meter, diving to snatch prey out of the air. And on the ground, the true nightmares crawl. A jet-black armored monster over 2.5 meters long slithers from the mist, Arthropleura, the largest millipede that ever lived. The crunch of dozens of legs over rotting wood signals an unstoppable grinding machine. A human dropped into this world would be nothing more than an appetizer. But this bizarre golden age could not last. Nature was about to press the delete button on all of life. But before that button was pressed, walk with me a little longer through this steaming forest. The air is so thick with oxygen that fires, once lit by lightning, burn hotter and wilder than anything today. The ground squelches with black peat that will one day become the coal that powers human cities. Every breath you take here would feel intoxicating, almost too rich. This was the lush, monstrous high water mark of the insect world, and it would never come again. Why did the giant insects never return? Because the oxygen never rose so high again. When the great forests were finally buried and the oxygen levels fell, the physical ceiling on insect size dropped with them. Meganeura and its monstrous kin were prisoners of a single freakish moment in atmospheric history. The bugs that crawl through your garden today are the small, humble survivors of a lost age of giants. Now imagine you, a modern human, set down in that carboniferous forest at noon. The heat is tropical and wet, the air heavy and strangely sweet. Giant horsetails and tree ferns rise around you like the pillars of a green cathedral, vanishing into a canopy so dense that the ground stays in permanent twilight. Everything is oversized dragonflies, like seagulls, millipedes, like crocodiles, spiders you do not want to think about. And the silence is not really silence at all, but a constant low hum and rustle of countless unseen things moving through the ferns. You would not last a day, but you would never forget it. And here is the quiet gift that forest left us. All those countless trees that fell and refused to rot, pressed down under mud for 300 million years, became the coal we would one day dig up and burn. The entire industrial revolution, the power stations, the smoke and steel of the modern world, all of it ran on the buried sunlight of the Carboniferous. When we burn coal, we are releasing energy that a fern captured from a sun that shone before the dinosaurs were born. We are, in the most literal way, living off the ghosts of an ancient forest. But nature keeps no golden age forever. The same buried carbon that made the air so rich would in time be part of a far darker story. And the continents themselves were on the move, sliding together into a single vast supercontinent Pangaea, where the interiors baked into merciless deserts. The stage was being reset for the greatest catastrophe life would ever face. The clock was ticking toward the darkest minute of the entire day. The Great Dying and the Empire of Dinosaurs. The clock strikes 20 to 11. We are about to witness the bloodiest event in all 4.5 billion years, the Great Dying, the Permian mass extinction. The culprit hid beneath the ground itself. In Siberia, a vast system of crustal rifts tore open, and a sea of magma spanning millions of square kilometers surged to the surface, erupting without pause for 1 million years. To grasp the scale, forget every volcano you have ever seen. This was not a mountain that erupted. It was a wound in the planet the size of a continent, bleeding lava for 10,000 centuries without rest. The molten rock it produced could have buried the entire United States a kilometer deep. And the lava was not even the true killer, it was merely the match. The real weapon was the gas it unleashed and the runaway heating that followed. But the lava only killed what was near. As the magma rose, it cooked the vast coal beds buried underground, blasting trillions of tons of carbon dioxide and sulfur into the sky. An extreme greenhouse effect took hold. Temperatures spiked. The oceans heated toward boiling, reaching 40 degrees at the equator, and turned into stagnant, oxygen-starved pools that bled a deadly purple. Toxic gas bubbled to the surface, poisoning creatures on the shore and corroding the ozone layer above, so that ultraviolet light hammered down without mercy. The sky became a soup of ash pouring sulfuric acid rain. It was a perfect chain of doom. 96% of marine species vanished, 70% of land vertebrates collapsed. Earth seemed to draw its last breath, thrown back to the starting line, silent as a graveyard. Let this number settle in your mind. 96%. For nearly every family of creatures alive, 96 out of 100 simply ceased to exist. Reefs that had grown for millions of years fell silent. Whole branches of the tree of life were sawn off in an eye blink. Life would need 10 million years just to recover its footing, the longest hangover in the planet's history. The Permian extinction was the closest life on Earth has ever come to ending altogether. And yet, beneath the smoldering ash, a few small, mammal-like reptiles survived. They had no idea that this brutal extinction had cleared away every rival, opening vast ecological gaps for their descendants to rise. The clock nears 11. The stage was swept clean, and the true kings of Earth stepped into the light. Welcome to the age of dinosaurs. It is worth honoring those humble survivors. They were not the mightiest beasts of their age, those had all died. They were the small, the adaptable, the ones that could hide, endure, and make do with little. Over and over in this long story, it is not the giants who inherit the future, but the modest and the flexible who happen to be in the right burrow when the sky falls. Keep that in mind. It will matter again before our day is done. It is worth remembering how they earned that crown. The dinosaurs did not conquer the world in a single leap. They inherited a broken, half-empty planet and spent millions of years growing into the spaces the dying had left behind. Slowly their legs came in under their bodies, letting them run and stand tall. Slowly they grew larger, faster, and more varied, until they filled every niche from the treetops to the swamps. Their empire was not an accident of size. It was the reward for surviving the worst day the Earth had ever seen. For an hour and a half on our clock, 160 million real years, Earth belonged utterly to them. Never before, and never again, would creatures rule with such authority and sheer size. Imagine standing on a Jurassic plain. The ground trembles rhythmically beneath your feet. Thump, thump. You look up, and blotting out the sky is a herd of sauropods. Behold, Argentinosaurus, as long as 3 buses in a row, weighing nearly 100 tons, its neck rising 15 meters to tear through the treetops. Its heart alone was the size of a car. When such a herd moved, they were walking mountains, flattening everything in their path. And here is the strangest truth of the dinosaurs. They were not lumbering failures waiting to die. They were one of the most successful designs life ever produced, ruling every continent for 160 million years, nearly 1,000 times longer than our own species has existed. If success is measured in time, the dinosaurs beat us so badly it is almost embarrassing. They did not fall because they were weak. They fell because the sky itself betrayed them. Before that betrayal, though, let us linger in their world at its height. Stand again on that Cretaceous plain at dawn. Mist rises off a slow river. A herd of horned triceratops moves through the ferns like living tanks, their frills catching the first light. Somewhere in the trees, a family of raptors watches, patient and clever. This was not a world of mindless monsters. It was a rich, functioning kingdom, as intricate and balanced as any rainforest today. And it had ruled unbroken since long before flowers existed. Now imagine you, a modern human, standing small at the feet of a living Argentinosaurus. Your head does not even reach its ankle. Its leg rises above you like the trunk of an ancient tree, and when it shifts its weight, you feel the ground answer through the soles of your feet. Far above its tiny head turns on that impossibly long neck, barely aware of you at all. To this animal you are not prey, not threat, not even worth noticing, just a small, warm thing underfoot in a world built to a scale that has no place for you. That is what it truly meant to live in the age of giants. They even had feathers. Many of them, including the smaller cousins of T-Rex, wore coats of downy plumage in colors we are only beginning to guess at. The line between dinosaur and bird was already blurring. In a very real sense, the dinosaurs never fully died. Every sparrow at your window, every crow on a wire is a living dinosaur, the last surviving branch of that 160-million-year empire. But the empire of the lizards was not confined to the plains. Look to the sky. Giant shadows glide past, blotting out the moon. Those are not birds. They are pterosaurs, Quetzalcoatlus, with a wingspan of 11 meters as wide as a fighter jet, riding the thermals across whole oceans to pluck fish from the waves. And beneath the waves, true horror reigned. Plesiosaurs with necks like pythons wove through the reefs, and the mighty mosasaur, 15 meters long, could swallow a great white shark in a single bite, turning the Cretaceous seas into a bloodbath. Now imagine you, a modern human, treading water in that Cretaceous sea. The surface is calm, deceptively warm. Then a shadow, the length of a bus, glides beneath your feet, unhurried, ancient, and utterly in command. The mosasaur does not rush because nothing in this ocean can challenge it. In these waters, our species would not sit near the top of the food chain. We would be a soft, slow, and thoroughly unremarkable snack. It is a useful reminder that our dominance today is not some law of nature. It is simply our brief turn. But the supreme symbol of power appeared only in the final minutes of the Cretaceous. 68 million years ago, an ear-splitting roar tore through the forest. The ground shook. Tyrannosaurus rex stepped from the brush. 12 meters long, 4.5 tall, 8 tons of pure violence. Its jaws held 60 serrated teeth the size of bananas, built not to slice flesh, but to crush bone. For millions of years, T-Rex was the very image of invincibility, a creature with no natural enemy. But every pride must one day pay its price. And yet, for all its terror, the T-Rex was no mindless brute. Its senses were extraordinary. A sense of smell that could find a carcass from kilometers away, eyes set forward for sharp hunting vision, and a brain far larger and cleverer than the old cartoons ever allowed. It cared for its young. It may even have hunted in family groups. When we imagine it as nothing but a roaring monster, we sell short one of the most magnificent animals that ever drew breath. It was not a movie villain. It was the perfected masterpiece of 100 million years of evolution, and it had no idea its reign was measured now in only minutes of our cosmic day. The asteroid and the dawn of humanity. The clock strikes 11:39. Only 21 minutes remain. It was an ordinary afternoon at the end of the Cretaceous 66 million years ago. Herds of Triceratops chewed ferns, while a T-Rex sniffed for prey beneath a pale sun. The sky was a deep, calm blue, but against that blue, a tiny point of light appeared. At first, it looked like a star in daylight, but it did not stay still. It grew larger and larger. It became a rolling fireball, trailing a colossal tail of smoke. An asteroid 10 kilometers wide, a rock larger than Mount Everest, hurtling at 70,000 kilometers an hour, 60 times the speed of sound. The dinosaurs looked up, their eyes reflecting the light of the apocalypse. They did not know to flee. They had no concept of death falling from the sky. They simply stared as the stone god of death descended. For those animals there was no warning, no meaning, no chance. One moment they were grazing beneath a blue sky, the next the sky itself caught fire. If there is any mercy in the story, it is that for the creatures nearest the impact, the end came faster than thought, a single white flash, and then nothing. It was the most violent single second the surface of the Earth has ever known. The asteroid pierced the atmosphere in under 2 seconds and plunged into the shallow sea of the Gulf of Mexico. It gouged a crater 150 kilometers wide and 20 deep. The energy released was 100 million megatons, billions of times the bomb that fell on Hiroshima. In the first millisecond, a flash brighter than 1,000 suns erupted, and every living thing within 1,500 kilometers was vaporized before its nerves could feel pain. Then, a shockwave of compressed air faster than any hurricane tore across the continent, uprooting forests and flinging animals like broken toys. Earthquakes measuring 11 shook the world. In the ocean, a mega tsunami hundreds of meters high swept hundreds of kilometers inland, and the coldest killer came from the sky itself. Molten rock flung into space rained back as trillions of glowing glass beads, turning the whole atmosphere into a giant oven. Forests across every continent burst into flame. Days later, the fires died, but billions of tons of ash and soot wrapped the globe in absolute darkness. Nuclear winter began. Without light, photosynthesis stopped, and the food chain was severed at its root. The giant herbivores starved, and the great tyrants like T-Rex tore at each other over rotting carcasses before they too collapsed onto the filthy snow. 160 million years of majesty wiped out by a stray rock. 99% of dinosaur species went extinct. But once more life found a way. As the tyrants fell, small creatures hiding in burrows raised their heads. They were mammals, our most distant ancestors, shrew-like and trembling. Why did they survive when the mighty T-Rex did not? The answer was humility. They needed no hundreds of kilograms of meat. They ate insects and seeds and scraps, and they had a power reptiles lacked, warm blood and insulating fur to keep themselves alive in the cold, and milk to nourish their young when all else failed. That primal mother's love saved our lineage from extinction. It is humbling to realize that we exist because the giants died. Had that asteroid missed, had it arrived a few minutes earlier or later, striking deep ocean instead of shallow sea, the dinosaurs might rule still, and no mammal would ever have grown large enough to dream. Every human face, every city, every voice raised in song hangs on the trajectory of a single rock 66 million years ago. We are the children of the luckiest catastrophe in history. It took a long time for the world to grow warm and green again. Ferns were the first to return, carpeting the ash. Then forests, then flowers, spreading in brilliant color, then the insects and birds that fed among them. Life did not merely survive the impact, it used the empty world as a blank canvas and painted something entirely new. Within a few million years, the age of mammals was in full bloom. For 60 million years, the mammals diversified, filling every role the dinosaurs had left behind. But one small, unremarkable branch up in the trees of Africa was about to matter more than all the rest. They were not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the largest. Their one strange gift was a brain that kept growing and hands that kept reaching. From that modest branch in the last sliver of the final minute of our day would come the creature now holding this screen.
11:45.
With the dinosaurs gone, land, sky, and sea lay open, and mammals exploded into the greatest evolutionary burst in history. Some returned to the ocean, becoming giant whales. On land, hornless rhinos stretched 5-meter necks to the leaves, woolly mammoths trudged the frozen tundra, and saber-toothed cats lurked with fangs 20 centimeters long. Earth overflowed with life once more. Some of the strangest new experiments of all went back to the water. There were mammals that had spent millions of years learning to walk on land, and now, generation by generation, they walked back into the sea. Their legs shrank into flippers, their bodies swelled to enormous size, and they became the whales, warm-blooded, air-breathing giants larger than any dinosaur, singing to one another across entire oceans. The blue whale alive today is the biggest animal that has ever existed, anywhere in the whole 4.5 billion year story. And it is our distant cousin. And now imagine you, a modern human, standing on the frozen edge of an ice age steppe 20,000 years ago. Your breath hangs in the air. Across the plain, a herd of woolly mammoths moves like brown hills against the white, their long tusks sweeping the snow for grass. A pride of cave lions watches from a ridge. This is the world your great-grandparents 100 generations back actually lived in. They hunted these giants with nothing but sharpened stone and fire and each other. This was our final exam as a species. And against all odds, we passed. What makes our species so strange is not our bodies, which are weak, but what we can do together. A single human alone on that step would die. But humans who could speak, plan, share, and remember could bring down a mammoth, cross a frozen sea, and carry fire and knowledge from one generation to the next. We did not conquer the world because we were strong. We conquered it because we could tell each other stories and act on them as one. The video you are watching right now is only the newest form of that same ancient magic. But turn your gaze to Africa. There, high in the rainforest canopy, a small branch of mammals was honing a priceless skill. Hands that could grasp with opposable thumbs and eyes that could judge depth. They were the first primates. The clock moves toward 11:58. Less than 2 minutes remain, and nature changed the rules once more. Mountains rose, the climate dried, and the forests of East Africa shrank into open savanna. Our ancestors, born to the safety of the trees, were forced down to the ground. Standing in tall grass, surrounded by predators, faster and stronger, this creature had no claws, no fangs, no armor, and a pitiful running speed. By every rule of evolution, it should have gone extinct. It was the perfect prey. But instead, it performed the greatest act in the history of life. It stood upright. Standing freed the hands, and those hands, joined to a brain swelling from the constant struggle to survive, worked a magic that reshaped the world. Tools. A broken branch became a spear, a flake stone became a knife, and then, on some cold, stormy night, our ancestor Homo erectus carried fire from a lightning-struck tree back to the cave. Now imagine you sit among them around that first fire. It did more than hold back the dark and the beasts. Fire, cooked food, and cooked meat gave a surplus of calories that flowed straight to one organ, the brain. Intelligence exploded. The meaningless cries of beasts became language, and for the first time these upright creatures sat together, shared food, and told each other stories. Family, tribe, and culture were born. Sit for a moment longer at that fire. Feel how much is contained in it. The warmth on your face is the same warmth that let our ancestors survive the freezing nights of the Ice Age. The circle of faces around the flame is the first version of every family dinner, every campfire story, every gathering that has ever made us human. In the flicker of that light, a creature that had spent millions of years running from the dark finally learned to hold a piece of the sun in its own two hands. From that fire, everything human unfolded with breathtaking speed. Bands became tribes, tribes became peoples, stories told around the flames became myths, then religions, then the shared beliefs that let millions of strangers cooperate. The same brain that learned to nap a stone would one day split the atom and read its own genetic code. All of it, every triumph and every horror of our species, grew from that first warm circle of light in the dark. 11:59 and 58 seconds. 2 seconds until midnight. This is our moment. Homo sapiens steps onto the stage. Enduring brutal ice ages, human tribes crossed land bridges spread out of Africa and reached every corner of the globe. With intelligence, unity, and deadly weapons, the creature that was once the weakest prey climbed to the very top of the food chain. pushing mammoths, saber-tooths, and even our cousins the Neanderthals into extinction one by one. Think about how recent all of this truly is. For most of our existence, we were just one more clever animal on the plains, few in number, easily forgotten. There were once several kinds of humans walking the earth at the same time. Cousins who lit their own fires and buried their own dead, now only one remains us. We are the sole survivors of an entire family of humans alone at the top, holding a power no creature before us ever imagined. And we gained almost all of it in the final dizzying blink of this cosmic day. And now hold your breath. The clock shows only the final tenth of a second. A single blink. In that instant, everything you call history erupts. Humans throw down their spears and plant seeds. Agriculture is born. Huts become villages, then bustling cities. Language is carved into clay and writing begins. Egypt raises its pyramids, Rome marches its legions, the Great Wall rises stone by stone. Everything accelerates, blurred like film on fast forward. Clashing swords give way to gunpowder sails, to steam candlelight, to blinding electricity. The world drowns in the blood of 2 world wars, and then in the most fragile instant a jet engine roars and Neil Armstrong sets foot on the moon. Computers awaken. The internet binds billions of minds through cables on the ocean floor. All of that legacy, every tear, every love song, every invention and every crime fits in the final fifth of a second. The ticking stops. Exactly 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. 24 hours have passed. The journey through 4.5 billion years, through seas of fire, deserts of ice, explosions of life, and the cruelest of extinctions, has arrived at this very moment, as you sit here, breathing the air of the 21st century. Looking back at that vast panorama, perhaps we feel overwhelmed and utterly small. We beat our chests and call ourselves the lords of all species. But on the ruthless scale of geological time, humanity has existed for only a few heartbeats. Our lives are as fragile as a speck of dust in an afternoon sunbeam. This Earth lived well before us, survived 5 great extinctions, and will keep turning long after, even if we are gone. And yet, that smallness does not make us meaningless. No creature in the past 24 hours, not the greatest tyrannosaur, not the wildest supervolcano, ever held the power to change the face of the planet as fast as we do. In a mere tenth of a second, we have bent rivers, leveled mountains, and altered the very chemistry of the air. We have become a force of nature, a man-made asteroid aimed at ourselves. But there is one more thing that makes us different from every force that came before. The asteroid did not know it was falling. The volcanoes did not choose to erupt. The cyanobacteria never understood what their oxygen would do. We are the first power in 4.5 billion years that can see the consequences of its own actions and choose differently. No creature before us could look back across the whole of this day and understand it. You just did. So carry this with you when the video ends. You are not separate from this story. You are its newest sentence still being written. The same atoms that boiled in the Hadean seas and rode inside the dinosaurs now sit in the hand you are holding this screen with. You are Earth, grown old enough to look at itself and wonder. And what you choose to do with that awareness is the one part of this ancient story that has not been written yet. For 4.5 billion years, the Earth has been telling a story with no listener, a story of fire and ice, of life invented and life destroyed, written in stone and never once read. And then, in the final tenth of a second, it produced something new, a creature that could look back across the whole of that time and understand it. Tonight, for 1 hour, you have been that listener. The planet finally has an audience. What an extraordinary thing to be. 5 times before this planet has been brought to the brink, and 5 times life has answered with something new and unimagined. We happen to be alive at a moment when the 6th great change is beginning, and this time, for the first time, the force behind it can read the warning in the rocks. That is not a reason for despair. It is the rarest kind of opportunity the universe has ever offered. The dinosaurs never had it. We do. So when this day ends and the clock resets, remember that you were handed something almost no creature in 4.5 billion years ever held the ability to know the whole story, and a choice about how the next page reads. The fish that crawled ashore did not choose. The mammal in its burrow did not choose. But you sitting here at the very tip of that unbroken 4 billion year chain do. That may be the most astonishing outcome of this entire, long, violent, beautiful day.
The biggest question now is not where we came from, but where we will go. Can we, with all our intelligence and pride, overcome the disasters of our own making? Will we be wise enough to protect this fragile blue home? The clock of a new day has begun to count its first seconds. The future is not written in stone. It is being written by our choices today.
Thank you for traveling with me to the end of this epic chronicle. Which moment amazed you most, or sent a shiver down your spine? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read them. If you love journeys like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep exploring the great mysteries of the universe together. Until the next journey, I wish you a new day and a new cycle of time full of meaning.